Life's too short to drive boring cars. So the transmission in a modern day vehicle is just so important. I mean, engines give the vehicle life, electronics bring it all together, but the transmission is what ties the engine to the wheels, and it's so critical that you have a transmission that works reliably. If not, the engine can run, but the vehicle just won't move. It's imperative that you have a good transmission. Well, today I'm going to give you a list of 5 of the best transmissions and the vehicles you'll find them in, just to make sure you have yourself a great vehicle to drive. Let's get into it now. So the beauty is there's many different transmissions available on the market today. The manual allows the driver to select a ratio depending on the speed and performance they're looking to attain. Then there's the double clutch transmission, which is essentially 2 sets of clutches, allows you to select the gear and the next clutch is all ready to go, so it allows for lightning speed shifts. Then there's the automatic, which is a torque converter, liquid filled, and that is typically what everybody knows as an automatic transmission, and the car basically does its own gear selection and varies the ratios depending on the need and the desire for performance and economy. But then there's the CVT, which is the continuously variable transmission found in many cars now, typically lower horsepower vehicles. And what that is a series of pulleys and belts, which is constantly changing depending on the driving needs. So the first transmission on my list should be of no surprise, and I think most people would agree with it because it's versatile, it can handle a variety of different horsepower outputs, it's quick shifting, it's reliable, and it's all the goods. And that is the ZF8 HP. And now it's a fully automatic torque converter transmission, 8 speeds, and it's been upgraded since the 6 HP, which was also very durable as well. The ZF8 HP is made in Germany, came out around 2008, and was proven to be at least 11% more efficient than the outgoing 6-speed ZF model. Now the beauty is every one of these new BMWs has the ZF transmission because it's robust, it's durable, and it's reliable. And BMW has their own challenges with drivetrains, coolant leaks, and oil leaks that they definitely don't need more problems with the automatic transmission. Now, as you know, BMWs were dabbling with dual clutch transmissions in a lot of the vehicles, for example, the M3s, M4s, M5s, and then they steered away from it, pardon the pun, and now they've gone to straight automatic. Even in the new M5, even the new M550, even the new M8, everything is an automatic. The only exception to that now pretty much is manual gearboxes available in the 2 Series, 3 and 4 Series cars at this time. Now that's part of the reason why people love the BMW driving experience now, is because the way these transmissions are even dialed in. They can now shift as quick as 200 milliseconds between shifts, and now they're not just a sequential gearbox. You can actually go from 8th to 2nd gear on the flip of a hat as needed. And although they weigh about 190 pounds, the beauty is they're compact and they can fit in almost any chassis. That's why they're packaged so well. And part of the versatility means they can also handle higher horsepower applications. For example, right there, we have the M8. Now this has the 4.4 liter twin turbo V8, makes about 620 horsepower, makes a lot of power, a lot of torque, and that could put strain on drivetrain if it's not up to the task. But apparently the ZF8 HP can handle up to 520 pound-feet of torque, which should be adequate for this particular drivetrain. And the beauty is there's many cars that you'll find this transmission fitted in. The X3, X5, 2 Series, 3 Series. You'll also find them in Aston Martins, Audis, Volkswagens, Porsche Cayennes, Dodge, Jaguars, Land Rovers, and Maseratis. You get the gist. Very popular. So the second transmission that I truly believe is one of the most workhorse, bulletproof transmissions that you can couple up to any car, anywhere, is the ZF 6HP. But specifically, even the 26 version is the high horsepower version. But what you find here is the BMW X5, and it's the E70 variation. This is my personal X5, and knocking on wood, never really had any problems with the transmission. Sure, you can get coolant leaks and oil leaks, but the transmission is one of the bulletproof components of many of the BMWs. Now, the ZF 6HP came out essentially in 2000, started out with the 7 Series BMW, and it was available all the way up to about 2014 in a variety of different cars. Largely BMW, some Jags, Ford Falcons, and a few others, for example, like the 1 Series, 6 Series, 7 Series, as well as E60 5 Series BMWs. Now this is the M5, specifically has its own unique 7-speed SMG gearbox, but everything else with 4 and 6-cylinder engines in the E60 variations of cars also use that 6-speed ZF Auto gearbox. Now the beauty is you can have these great BMWs, they look great, they drive well, And the whole driving experience comes from the handling, the performance of the engine, as well as the transmission. The transmission can really transform a vehicle from a ho-hum to something that feels lively and exciting to drive. And that's why BMW always couples their cars with some of the best transmissions available. That's right, it has 6 forward speeds that are lockable through the torque converter. In other words, it vastly improves performance as well as fuel economy. So the next transmission, that's one of my favorites. I think it's truly one of the best in the business, but it's a double clutch transmission, and in the Porsche world, it's called the PDK. And we find it in many of their cars. There's only a few vehicles nowadays that you can find the manual transmission in the Porsche world. Otherwise, they're using the PDK transmission. And what we have here is a Porsche Macan, as well as pretty much any other Porsche down that line is using the PDK. But looking down here, this Macan has some great exhaust tips. Love these taillight assemblies. It's multi-dimensional there. Of course, great alloy wheels in Porsche world. And they have these great little strip along the bottom. As typical for Porsche, they got nice contours, LED strip, sunroof on top, and a very sporty tail end. And as you know, I did a review a short while back about this exact vehicle. You're definitely going to want to check that out. But in short, the PDK is one of the best, smoothest, fastest, most refined double clutch transmission on the market. That's why Porsches are so synonymous with performance driving. Not only do they accelerate well and brake well and handle like they're on rails, but they actually have gearboxes that add to the entire experience. Now, Ferrari, sure, they use double clutch. McLaren, Lamborghini, they're all using double clutch transmissions. Exotic cars started using it, but now it's trickling down to the mainstream, and Porsche has actually perfected it. And this is why, other than a few electrical issues where it needed firmware updates or other electrical component failures, for the most part, the PDK is relatively durable. Now, there's not a lot of mechanical failures outright. There is the occasional leak from the odd unit, and they're not cheap. If they do fail, you're talking about a $20,000 bill to replace one outright. $7,000 possibly get something that's rebuilt. They're not cheap, but none of them are. That's just the technology. But there's nothing that shifts as good as a double clutch transmission because there's 2 sets of clutches. While one's engaged, the other one's already lined up. So once you shift to the next one, it's alternating between clutch sets. And so you're always instantaneously reaching for the next gear once this one's finished. So it's back and forth, and the shift time is very minimal, and that's why they do such a great job. Now, the downside, of course, they're very mechanical, they're very expensive, they're large, and they're heavy, and so they don't fit in a lot of cars. Lamborghini Aventador, they don't even use a double clutch because they felt that they needed the single clutch, and it's also a smaller gearbox. The dual clutch would have taken up too much real estate. Now, as I've said, other than Ferrari or McLaren, for the mainstream, Porsche has the best gearbox in the land for double clutch. And that's why I have to make mention. I've driven them. They're phenomenally quick. They work seamlessly in auto mode, and as well, you can pull gears and feel like an F1 driver while you're doing it. The PDK. And the next gearbox that I think is actually one of the best of its kind, and I really don't like CVT transmissions, that's continuously variable transmissions. I think generally they lack soul, they lack performance, and they generally get installed on gutless, low-powered cars. But now, did you know that Subaru has incorporated the CVT into their latest, from 2014 on, Subaru WRX, like we have here in red. Now, these cars are great. They've always been essentially the rally special. Now, looking at this, everybody likes a Subaru WRX. I mean, it harkens back to the rally days. I mean, with the big hood scoop, we've got great alloy wheels and an all-wheel drive system that beats everything this side of an Audi Quattro. Now, as you look, they're becoming more and more upscale. They feel less dressed down. And looking down, they have some great accents here in the back. And of course, as everything, they always get updated with time. And of course, here we have a Subaru. This is the all-wheel drive, as they always typically are in Subaru land. And of course, down here we have 2 pipes and 2 pipes again. And we have that great little center light. Wow, that's definitely a rally car at its finest. But these have a CVT transmission, which generally are not a fun transmission to drive. But Subarus work some magic. So they've made changes. So there's step changes as you're pulling gears, because you have gear levers to pull, and it makes you feel like you're actually changing gears. It doesn't just sit along on that constant drone that you find with your typical CVT transmission. It's also designed in such a way that as you do a hard launch, It tenses up the belt and essentially gets you a harder bite and a quicker launch out of the hole. It feels sportier, it sounds better, and it's better to drive than your standard CVT. Now, if you don't think CVTs are great for performance cars, well, how about 93, the F1 Williams team tried a CVT transmission that year and were actually banned as a result of walloping every other competitor on the circuit. Now, there are benefits to CVT transmissions. One, of course, is fuel economy. Two is it's smoother. The downside, of course, they're more expensive to manufacture. Sadly, that cost gets handed down to the consumer, right? So we pay a little extra even if you don't have the option to option out of it. So as I say, CVTs will never be on my checkbox. However, the WRX in the Subaru was designed in such a way that it actually feels somewhat engaging. It feels interesting to drive, and it takes sort of that lull and boredom out of the CVT experience. Now, the fifth gearbox I think is worth trying is a manual transmission, and it's in the Porsche 911 GT3. Looking right here is a 997 Carrera. This is not a GT3, but for all intents and purposes, the 911 hasn't changed all that much. But the GT3, with all its glory and its flat six engine at the back, they got the round headlights similar to this, but the GT3s have a little more aggressive spoiler, taller rims, certainly more performance-based engine, lightweight interior. The GT3 has always been the performance benchmark for Porsche enthusiasts. Up to 2014, the GT3 came in a couple of different formats, but for the most part, you could get a manual gearbox. But unfortunately, in the 991 Generation 1, Porsche dropped the manual tranny and went straight to a PDK in 2014. I'll tell you, enthusiasts were screaming and hollering, and they got really irate about it and said, we want our manual transmission back. Because at that time, Porsche went strictly dual clutch, which was, again, as I said before, the best gearbox in the dual clutch arena. However, the purists still wanted to row their own gears. And so Porsche took the 911, the GT3, after all the chirping and squawking from the enthusiasts, they end up converting it back. And in 2018, they then gave you both options, a manual gearbox or the PDK, depending on your particular taste. Many of the enthusiasts didn't care that the 0 to 60 mile per hour time was a half second slower on the manual version than the PDK. It wasn't about setting lap times with a lot of people, it was about the experience. And so that's why people complain. But I'll be perfectly frank with you, I've driven the manual and it is one of the slickest, nicest transmissions available in the manual gearbox arena versus a lot of the other makes. Now that's saying a lot because BMW still offers a manual transmission in an M2, in an M3, in an M4 as options. But as you can tell, it's a dying breed. Now with the onset of electric cars, there won't be a need for any transmission, let alone manual. And certainly everything today is very minimal. It's hard to find a manual transmission, but in the true sporting experience of a 911, the real enthusiasts, including myself, feel that the 911 GT3 transmission is one of the best driving experiences ever known to mankind. And with all of that said, be sure to click on that video. That's the selection of worst transmissions available on the market today. Definitely you want to see that so you don't make that mistake. Hope to see you real soon. Catch you then. Bye-bye.